Okay, today we're going to learn how to install a 1/32 step stepper. So we have our x-axis, our y-axis, our z-axis, our E0 axis, and our E1 axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up the MS pins. These are microstep pins. We have microstep 1, 2, and 3. And what we need to do is jump them all for the highest degree of step. If you want further detail on this, my previous video covers it in great detail. But in this case, we're just going to shorten it a little and put these jumpers on. In a moment, I'll explain the DRV8825 and how it works. So hang on. Okay, this is a fresh DRV8825. So I'm going to open it up here for you. And inside, we have two parts that come with it. We have the driver board, and then we have the heatsink. Now the heatsink will be placed on the chip to cool it. We also have a potentiometer here that we're going to use to adjust, possibly in the future, the actual current that comes out. But for now, we're going to stick to the default value that it's set to. So I'm going to show you how to put on the heatsink. What we want to do is peel off the sticker holder. And you just place that on there, avoiding touching any metal if you can. And in a moment, I'll show you actually the pins that we want to keep track of. Okay, this is the underside of the DRV8825. And what we're looking for is this pin right here, which is the EN or enable pin. So in a moment, I'm going to show you how to connect it to the RAMPS board. Okay, now that we're looking at the RAMPS board, I'm going to show you the x-axis for the stepper is going to be right here. And the pin that we're trying to find is the EN pin, which is right here. So this is the pin that we want to line up the pin from the bottom of the DRV8825. So in a moment, I'll show you how to connect it. Okay, to connect it, we know the EN pin is right here. So we just flip it over and line it up and then apply a little bit of thumb pressure. In a moment, I'll show you what we need to connect to test it, and then we'll load the firmware and go from there. Okay, to connect it, what we need to do is connect the 4 pins for the Nema 17 right here on the X pins. Next, we need to connect the end stop sensor. So I've gone over this several times before, so I'm going to be kind of brief. So what I've done is I've actually connected the stepper right there for the X-min axis. And what we're going to do in a moment is connect the USB and load the firmware. Okay, in a moment, we're going to load the actual firmware, but we have to connect the serial USB first. So the big end over here and the small end into the computer, and you'll hear a beep. In a moment, I'll show you how to load the Marlin firmware. Okay, we're going to open up the Marlin 1.1.8 folder. We're going to go to the Marlin folder. We're going to hit M on the keyboard. We're going to scroll down to marlin.ino. We're going to hit enter. Okay, we're going to go over to the configuration.h tab. We're going to do a find on default _access _steps _per _unit. We're then going to look at the values here. Now normally when we use the other stepper driver, we left these as default, but because it's not 1/16 a step, it's 1/32, what we have to do is change the 80 to a 160 and the 80 to a 160 if we were to use other axi. But seeing how we're not using other axis, we're not going to worry about it. So we're only going to do the X because that's what we're working on. And keep in mind these values can vary, and you need to use the RepRap calculator to figure out what your default values will be. So in a moment, we're going to load the actual firmware on the ramps, but let's double check something here. We have a port selected, we have the Arduino selected, so we're going to do a compile and upload. Okay, now what we're going to do is attach the power from the power supply. This is a 12-volt power supply. So we're going to attach the connector for the RAMPS board. Then we're going to plug it in. And in a moment, we're going to open up Pronterface and I'll show you how to test it. Okay, we're in the Pronterface folder. We're going to open up Pronterface. We're then going to connect to the device. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to home the X-axis, and with our hand we're going to manually actuate the end stop so that it knows where the end of the axis is. So I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So I'm going to click this to home, and then with my hand we are now homed. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move forward by 10 and see what happens. Now we're going to move forward by 100 and see what happens. Now we're going to move back by 100. So if you like my video, please press the like button and subscribe, and thank you for your time.